Thank you. At the Ethical Society, we organize our programmatic year around a theme, and this year's theme is exploring the human condition. The platform speakers team has been hard at work behind the scenes, and I hope you've enjoyed the diverse platforms that we've offered this season and are looking forward to the dynamic speakers with fascinating topics coming up in the months ahead. Our speaker today was one of the TEDx St. Louis Women speakers in 2023, and we are thrilled to have her here with us today. In Act 1 of her life, she was a travel RN, an adjunct professor of nursing, and became an addict after being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. In the current Act 2 of her life, she is an actress, a playwright, and a spokesperson for Prison Performing Arts. She is an artist and co-owner of Altitude Video Production and lives in Blue Springs, Missouri. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Julie Antoniuk.
Thank you. Get set up here. Imagine the worst thing that you've ever done, your very worst decision and your biggest mistake. Now, imagine the people sitting around you knew what you did. Imagine that everyone knew. Imagine that mistake would define you forever. Agnes Wilcox, the late brilliant founder of St. Louis's Prison Performing Arts program, used to tell audiences who had traveled to prison to see a Shakespeare play performed by inmates. She'd say, "The only difference between some of you and some of them, they got caught, you didn't." Prison arts programs are multidisciplinary performing arts and literacy programs. Personal growth, communication, job skills, education, they're fostered through artistic expression, the transformative power of the arts. Hundreds of these programs exist worldwide, and our St. Louis organization works with adults in 3 Missouri prisons and youth in 4 juvenile detention centers. We already know about the problems of mass incarceration. The United States locks up far more of our citizens than any other country. About 2 million are incarcerated right now in the United States. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, increasing incarceration rates have little to no effect on crime. Their latest numbers also show that 83% of prisoners return to prison within 9 years. Instead of focusing on isolation and punishment, countries that focus on rehabilitation and reentry have far fewer offenders that go back to prison. Without a standardized measure of what exactly constitutes recidivism, the numbers can vary, but what is clear is that our prison system is deeply flawed. Prison arts programs are a powerful weapon to help stop the revolving prison door. Studies consistently reveal that art program participants are much more likely to succeed in reentry. So why should we care? Because today's inmate is tomorrow's neighbor. Most prisoners return home to our communities. Having a criminal record can feel like having a permanent label, preventing you from job opportunities and housing. It can feel like being branded, shunning you from friends and family. Having a criminal record can feel like a punch to your gut to realize that's the reason that your daughters weren't invited to that slumber party. So, in case you haven't previously suspected, yes, I have been to prison. I normally don't lead with that when meeting new people, unless you're trying to date one of my 19-year-old twin daughters. And that's the only time I've been to prison has ever come in handy. So to satisfy the question, what did she do? I know that you're all asking. Here's my story. In 2004, I was a traveling nurse in California. I gave birth to healthy twin girls, and I found myself in an abusive relationship. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was awarded full custody, and I moved back to St. Louis. As my multiple sclerosis progressed, I was prescribed large doses of fentanyl for pain, and then the fentanyl was stopped cold turkey. So in order to combat the withdrawal symptoms that I was feeling, I turned to opiates. Opiates turned to heroin. Heroin turned to possession charges. And like 85% of inmates, I went to prison with drug charges. Prison was an endless, cold, dark night. I had low self-esteem. I felt shame, embarrassment, and deep regret as I became dehumanized, de-enfranchised, and known as Department of Corrections number 1264777. A few months into my sentence, I discovered a spoken word poetry class. That changed everything. You see, in prison, we're called offenders or inmates, and we're referred to by a number. But in poetry class, we were called by our first names, and we were referred to as artists. On the prison yard, we'd often hear, "No talking, inmate." But in poetry class, we were encouraged to ask questions, and we were encouraged to share what we had created. Spoken word poetry, and then later theater, it gave my life behind bars a sense of meaning and purpose. It created a community of peers in a safe space. In many ways, the qualities that we'd attribute to surviving prison life are the exact opposite of what makes a great actor, artist, poet, or musician. The very nature of acting requires you to step outside of yourself and see the world through a different character's eyes. That's the definition of empathy, isn't it? To see a tough prisoner performing Shakespeare on stage, that can change the whole environment of prison. That spoken word poetry class, it was like the light shining through the cold, dark night. The arts gave me back my voice, and the arts gave me back my humanity. Just prior to my release, I was offered a paid job with the St. Louis Prison Performing Arts Alumni Theater Program. The theater program is comprised of people that had previously participated behind bars. It wasn't a lot of money, but it would check the box for employment that my parole required. When I went to my first rehearsal, I knew that I had found my people. When I lost my housing, another actor I barely knew let me sleep on his couch for a while. The support from those who had successfully navigated reentry before me was unparalleled, as well as the support from our supporters, our benefactors, and our audiences. Since I joined the Alumni Theater Group, we've written and produced quite a few plays. Here is, there we go. Here's Eric and David performing in Elsinore. It's a play that they wrote themselves. It's a prequel to Hamlet. Both Eric and David, who wrote this play, they were just nominated for an award here in St. Louis for the best new play for a play that's called The Privilege of Being Second. And here's Lawanda playing the Queen. Yes, there she is. Lawanda was sentenced to life without parole when she was a minor. Due to a law change that prevents minors from being given life without parole sentences, she became a free citizen 2 years ago after serving 28 years behind bars. She is a phenomenal person and a phenomenal actress. And here's my friend Katie. Yep, there she is. She's performing earlier a couple months ago. She's an artist and she trains assistance dogs. She's now completing her college degree. After a few years of being in the Prison Performing Arts Alumni Theater Company, I looked around and I realized that none of us were returning to prison. I couldn't even imagine one of us going back to prison. But statistically, 4 out of 5 of us should be back behind bars. So I did some research, and I found that since our program was founded almost 20 years ago, guess how many of us returned to prison? Less than 5%. St. Louis is not the only city with a prison performing arts program such that returns like with re-entry. There are hundreds of these programs that exist worldwide. As I started doing my research, I found that the recidivism rate for all of these re-entry arts groups is vastly lower than that 83% national average. New York's rehabilitation through the arts program, also less than 5%. Shakespeare Reclaimed in Detroit, 6%. And Los Angeles, less than 1%. Numbers barely scratch the surface when it comes to defining the real success of these arts programs, both in and after prison. Recidivism is a downstream effect. For example, my dear friend Patty Pruitt is serving year 37 of a 50-year sentence. The Innocence Project and advocates have been trying to get her exonerated, basically since her trial 37 years ago. Patty Pruitt is not included in these numbers for recidivism, yet she is one of the most influential women in prison. She is one of our longest standing artists, and she's so influential. She has encouraged dozens and dozens of women to go out and complete their degrees and be very successful. While it's true that prison artists are largely a self-selecting group, it's artists like Patty that have encouraged so many others, less willing inmates, to join the program and reap the rewards. So why are prison arts programs so successful? And how do we define success? Detroit Public Theater's Shakespeare in Prison program set out to answer these questions. In a case study that followed the artists throughout a theater production, they found that the actors developed enhanced empathy, a positive sense of community, trust, self-efficacy, and an evolving positive narrative identity. By collaborating in a Shakespeare performance, a work greater than themselves, that became a turning point. That turning point allowed them to change their narrative identity. When we change the story that we tell ourselves, we are empowered to make changes. From Department of Corrections number 1264777 to Julie, artist. When we change our narrative, we change ourselves. From creating safer prison environments by drastically reducing disciplinary actions to improving mental health, prison arts programs are able to bring so much good to such bad situations. I'm a former addict with a criminal record, but now I'm able to connect and bond with audiences in my communities. Through theater, we may even be able to change some ideas about who those 2 million incarcerated people are. But don't let me tell you. Come see for yourself. Come see a play performed in prison by inmates or by one of our alumni theater group's performances. To see a play. So just think of the street credit that you could have by saying that you've been to prison to see a play. This is my Act 2 brought to you through Prison Performing Arts. Doesn't everyone deserve a chance at their own Act 2? So make good choices, but remember that bad choices can make great theater performed by ex-felons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your story and your vulnerability with us. And yeah, let's go see some theater, people. Members of the Welcome Team will now take up a collection to support the society. If you are moved to make a donation today, we appreciate anything you may be able to offer. Like all nonprofits, we rely on the generosity of our members and friends to ensure our community can keep providing our many free programs. If you don't have cash with you today, you can donate at ethicalstl.org/donate or use the QR code on the screen. If you are interested in joining the Ethical Society and becoming a pledging member, our membership coordinator, Courtney Scott Camarada, will be available afterwards downstairs to answer any of your questions. I have a few announcements today. The first, if you're hungry, please join us in the Becker Room after platform today for an Irish-style lunch, loaded potatoes with yummy toppings, green salad, Irish soda bread, and dessert. Only $8 for adults and $4 for kids. Peanut butter and jelly, or just plain jelly sandwiches, and potato chips are available for kids if that's their preference. All proceeds go to local social groups to assist women and children. It's sponsored by the Tuesday Women's Association of the Ethical Society with the Ethical Ladies. What if, in your second act, you could do something new, challenging, and meaningful that would also address the problem of climate change? Please join the Climate Action Now team at next Sunday's 9:45 forum with our speakers, Marcia McCabe and John Rainey, who, after successful careers in the IT and mental health fields, have embarked on a new chapter in their lives, establishing a family farm based on the principles of soil health that are the foundation of regenerative agriculture, not architecture. They will share what they have learned to date and offer thoughts on what we can all do to support this important change in agricultural practices. And from the Board of Trustees, the recording from the Zoom meeting on Wednesday with our AEU representatives will be available on the Ethical Society YouTube channel soon. If you missed the meeting, please make sure to check it out soon. If you have any questions about our relationship with the AEU, please feel free to email the board at ethicalstl.org. We would love to keep you informed about future events at the Ethical Society of St. Louis. If you'd like to join our weekly newsletter, please use the QR code on the screen to sign up. This is a vibrant place, and there are a lot of activities to experience, and I hope that you can find a way to get involved and connected in the community in ways that feel good for you. If you want details on any of the events, you can check out the weekly newsletter, the Friends of the Ethical Society Facebook page, or email the relevant staff or volunteer. And now, please welcome Patrick back to the stage for his final musical piece, which is selections from Variations on My Old Kentucky Home.
So this looks more like a guitar, I think, to all of you if you're unfamiliar with the early versions. This is an authentic late 19th century American-made guitar built around 1890. And it's a great guitar for this piece because the piece was also composed around 1890. And you may not be aware, but America's first guitar hero lived in St. Louis, was born in St. Louis in 1860, and lived here for most of his life when he wasn't living in New York City as America's preeminent guitar virtuoso. And his name was William Foden, and I encourage you to look him up and bid for him to have a star on Del Mar. But he wrote this piece. This is one of many pieces he wrote for the instrument, and this is just a small part of the entire piece. Selections of